Talking with Dr. James Dowd, the author of the Vitamin D Cure. How did you first discover that you were deficient, and how did you get out of that hole, so to speak, and talk about your history with vitamin D?
Well, so my story is that I was raised in Texas, in Houston, Texas, so the southern part of Texas. And I was on the swim team, and I rode my bike a lot, and I was outside all the time. And most of my training was done in Texas. I did my undergraduate there, I did medical school there, I even did my fellowship there in rheumatology. And so I met someone during my fellowship, and when we moved back to her home state of Michigan, things were okay for 2 or 3 or 4 years. And then about 4 or 5 years into living in Michigan, I just didn't feel well. The quality of my sleep deteriorated. I started getting muscle cramps, and my hands would, the end joints of my fingers, and being a rheumatologist, I knew, okay, this is probably early osteoarthritis, but why is it happening to me at only 40 years of age? And I'd wake up in the morning, particularly at the end of winter and in the early spring, and I could hardly make a fist, and it hurt for patients to shake my hand. I said, something's not right here. And it was weird that it was coming, the first few years, it was only in this certain time of year that I would have these symptoms, and then it started becoming more year-round symptoms. And what was odd was I was seeing this happening myself, and then I would go to the office and talk to patients, and they would tell me the exact same story that I was feeling myself. And I was thinking, okay, whatever's happening to me is happening to my patients too. And then I stumbled across a handful of patients. These were actually African Americans in the office, patients who came in with diseases that were vaguely possibly related to vitamin D deficiency. And I thought, well, I'll check a vitamin D level, see what it is. And their levels, several of them were undetectable. And I thought, okay, this is bizarre. I was always told in training that, all you need is casual sun exposure. And that casual sun exposure definition was, 10 or 15 minutes exposure of your hands and your face. That's plenty, okay? Well, clearly these people were getting that. Why did they have no vitamin D at all in their blood? And then I would go through the process of replacing their vitamin D, and all kinds of symptoms were getting. Their aches and pains went away, their fatigue went away, they were sleeping better, and I thought, okay, something bizarre is going on here, and I need to know more about this. And so at that point, I became very interested in vitamin D, started measuring it much more often in my patients, and started vociferously reading all the science about vitamin D. And when I looked up after about a year or two, I had read I don't know how many hundreds of papers on vitamin D, and I was really in a completely different place about how I thought about people's illnesses, and what I could do for them. And that maybe even some of these patients you could cure by simply changing their lifestyle or supplementing with targeted supplementation. You could eliminate the symptoms that they were coming in with. So it was really an eye-opener and a game changer for me.
And talk about your progression then when you started to feel better, and how now that's translated into your practice. I mean, your practice has changed a lot in how you treat patients with some of the things that you had.
Yeah, so initially it was all about vitamin D, and as I was reading about vitamin D, I also wanted to learn more about calcium, because it was clear that vitamin D wasn't the only thing regulating calcium, that there were other factors involved. And that led to me reading a lot more about diet, and acid-base balance in the diet, and exercise and what role that played. And it really morphed into an entire lifestyle change. And as I was reading about these things, I was making the changes myself. I'm always the first guinea pig. And so I was making these changes, and I was feeling incredible. I mean, I thought to myself, okay, all the aches and pains have gone away. My hands don't hurt anymore. My sleep has gone back to the way it was. I can sleep like a baby. The exercise got rid of, cramps in the neck. I was taking some magnesium citrate, and that got rid of a lot of muscle cramps I was having. So some of these complementary targeted supplements that complement one another that I talk about in the book really seemed to be working. I mean, I'd read the literature, then I would try it myself, and boom, I was feeling better. And I was like, wow, this is really cool how this works. And then I was starting to implement it in my practice as well, and seeing remarkable, not everybody was that remarkable, but clearly there were some patients. You come in, you make these very straightforward changes, and they come back in and they're just, thank you so much, this is unbelievable, I can't believe I feel so much better with such a simple solution. And other doctors were trying to give them medications, and they were on prescriptions for these symptoms, and they no longer needed these prescriptions. And so I was kind of experiencing this whole thing along with my patients, and it was really quite gratifying. And it was this momentum that developed from the reading and putting it into practice that led to the book.
Was it easy to translate that into your patients? When you talk about a lifestyle change, that's a lot more difficult than it is taking a medication once a day. Was that easy for you to change your lifestyle and your diet, and has that been for your patients as well? Have they been willing to make a big change like that?
Well, so lifestyle changes. This is, if we could answer this question, this is the $10 million question, because compliance is always a struggle. Now, when I first was introducing myself to all of these new ideas, and the enthusiasm alone motivated me to make all these changes, and I stuck to them like glue. And many of my patients, I see the same thing. In the first few months, they see this as a revelation, and they're thinking, wow, this is a whole new way of thinking about this problem I have, or these symptoms I have, and maybe there is something I can do about them, and they're motivated to take that step. And so for the first few months, maybe even for the first year, they are gung-ho, and they stick to it tightly. And then you feel better, and after you start feeling better, you think, well, maybe I can have a piece of pizza, or maybe I can add the bread back, and maybe I don't need to take the vitamin D in the summertime because I get out in the sun enough. And so you start to make some of these compromises, and what I found is that immediately you feel an impact now. And so what the initial change does is it tunes you into how much better you feel doing the right thing. And then when you slip up, it also tunes you into how lousy you feel when you're off the diet, when you're off the lifestyle changes, when you stop the targeted supplementation. So people still struggle with it, and so I see a lot of patients, and my visits become basically pep rallies to get them back on program. But I feel better about myself as a physician being a motivator for what I know is a healthy lifestyle than just refilling prescriptions and asking if they're taking their medications. So I feel much better about reinforcing these lifestyle changes at every visit than I did before, when all it was medications.
And how much more important is it when your patients educate themselves to know that if I change my lifestyle and do this, it's safe? I mean, it's a more healthy way of living versus medication, which could have a lot of question marks in the short and long term.
Yeah, it's initially when I started with this message, many patients were very receptive. Okay, as soon as you say, well, we might be able to get you off medications, their eyes get a little wider, and they say, really, I may not have to take this for the rest of my life, or I may not have to be on all of these things. And so receptivity early on is quite high. That's not to say that there aren't patients out there who are looking for a simple, convenient solution in the form of a pill. But most patients are very receptive. And now that I've been in practice and the book has come out, I'm actually attracting the patients who want this. And so the practice has even changed a bit from 5 years ago before the book came out, because patients are now coming in and they come in with a bag full of targeted supplements, and they come from another rheumatologist and they say, look, this is the rheumatologist, here's what they have me on. I don't want to take these things anymore, or I want to take as little as possible. Here's some things I've been experimenting with. What can you tell me about what I've been experimenting with, good or bad, or appropriate or inappropriate, because it's not good or bad, it's appropriate or inappropriate, and what other changes can I make? Empower me, in other words. They're asking me to empower them so that I don't have to take these medications. So it's really been a joy to see my practice sort of change in character, so that now I'm actually attracting patients who are even more motivated than the patients I had before, because they've already decided in their mind, this is the direction I want to go.